So, hi Amit, thank you so much for joining us and talking to the entire MBA community today. For people, just a quick background about Amit. Amit, pre-MBA, came from technology and sale background. He worked for Steel Authority India Limited. Did an MBA from Darden, went to one of the top 10 MBA programs in the world. Made a switch to HSBC Investment Banking, studied in the US, worked in London markets, then moved to HSBC Investment Banking, Mumbai, and then moved over to taking a very senior leadership position in CFA. Is leading the APAC for people who are keen on CFA. Amit is the person to go to now. So welcome, Amit. Thank you so much once again. Um, I'll just jump into questions right away. I'm very curious to ask you a lot of things. First question for you is, Amit, before you started in banking, you worked in technology, sale, steel authority. How easy or tough, how easy or how difficult was the transition to come from that background to getting into working for one of the largest banks in the world, especially in investment banking?
All right, Jatin, thank you so much for having me. So before I answer that question, Jatin, for everyone who doesn't know us, he's a dear friend. And the one thing I really enjoy or seeing Jatin is he's very happy with whatever he's doing. So that probably is the best thing that can happen to anyone.
Thank you.
So glad for you. Now the transition to investment banking. So as Jatin pointed out, I done my undergrad in engineering and I started my life as a management trainee with Steel Authority of India Limited, and then eventually worked in their software development center based out of Hyderabad. Everything was going well, and job was fun, but I realized I didn't have enough money in the bank to do other stuff in life, right? Which is where, I got an opportunity to join as a software guy again and work with Deutsche Bank in Singapore, right? So the remit was to, do software development for the various corporate investment banking products. Eventually, because of my interest in more interactions, I moved into more of a business analyst role, wherein I traveled across Asia Pacific and used to bring back requirements back to Singapore and then get it developed out of Singapore and Bangalore and deploy it, right? uh, while doing this I realized that I probably wanted to become a frontline banker like some of my intern clients I had, right? So when I asked around, and everybody is like, I think you've got some of the software attributes required to be a frontline banker, but you probably need to get a education in finance and accounting, because that's kind of the alphabet for finance, right? And that's when I realized that an MBA is probably the right way to go. So the first thing, when you are looking to make a career switch, I think it's critically important that you get into a top school, because once you get into a top school, that's half the battle won, right? Second thing is for a career switcher, both learning and recruitment becomes important as one looks at a B school. So I carefully selected Darden as a school which is known for its rigor in terms of learning, and a school which also has a lot of gives a lot of opportunities in the banking and finance services world, right? So I went there. I was overconfident. So when you go into a B school in the US, you start your classes mid-August, and the first banks start coming to your school in September, right? So that's how early the recruitment cycle starts, right? So banks started coming in. I still remember Merrill was the first bank in campus, first week of September. Completely ill prepared. Beyond the fact that I wanted to do investment banking, I had no clue. I still didn't get the message. I kept going down the path of being I will get a job. I mean, I'm Indian. We are the most hardworking people in the world. So what could go wrong, right? Come January, all the investment banks came to our campus to recruit, and I didn't get a job. I didn't get a summer internship with anyone, right? And that's when it really hit me. Okay, I've taken this massive loan. I was so confident of landing my dream job, and here there is no internship at all, right? And that's when I kind of leveraged my network, the Darden network, not my network, but the Darden network. So I just sucked myself and said that no, I'm going to make it work. Okay, no matter what. I'm at Darden, right? That's half the battle won, like I said. So I will get a job. Within 1 month, I had a job in Goldman Sachs private banking. Sorry, not a job. I had a summer internship in Goldman Sachs private banking in Singapore. I also had a HSBC Investment Banking summer internship in New York, right? And because my goal was to, since I'd already lived in Singapore, I wanted to, explore working in the US, European markets as well. So I took up the HSBC Investment Banking role in New York, right? Summer internship was fun. I was probably sleeping 4 or 5 hours a day, including over the weekends. I still remember, I'd met up with some of my friends once in Midtown Manhattan. That's where our offices are, for a movie starting at 12 midnight. Okay.
Okay.
It was the movie Devil Wears Prada. So there's this classmate of mine who was working in UBS. Another classmate was working in Lehman. The three of us got together. We went to watch Devil Wears Prada at midnight. So it was a full house, right? And we realized, the stories are very similar in the fashion industry and investment banking. Lots of hard work. Anyway, we all worked hard. We came away with full-time offers immediately after internship. So August 2005 is when I started my MBA. August 2006, when I completed my 1 year of MBA and an internship, I had a full-time offer. And with sign-on bonuses, etc., right? The second year was a party. Okay, so around and Jatin would know that because he was at as well. So when it came to joining in New York, things at HSBC Investment Bank in New York was not great. A lot of people had left, so I realized that maybe that's not the right place for me to start my banking career, which is why I asked for a transfer to London, which was HSBC's head office. Once I got there, our associate class had people from Harvard, Wharton, Kellogg, Michigan, Darden Business School, INSEAD, and a few other schools as well. I realized that I was probably the most well prepared in my entire class, and that's thanks to the rigor of Darden. We are doing so much hard work, especially in first year, that it prepares you for anything and everything, right? So I came out tops. I did really well in my role at HSBC, and that's when the financial crisis hit. I went through 13 rounds of layoffs, 12 or 13 rounds of layoffs, and I survived, right? And this was entirely due to the preparation that Darden had prepared me for and my hard work and commitment that was there, right? But otherwise, the transition had already happened. The fact that you went to Darden, the fact that you worked hard, the fact that you did a good summer internship, got a full-time job, built up your credibility, that really helped. And then it was all good. I hope I answered your question, Jatin.
Thank you. Now, I wanted to ask you, and by the way, I didn't know that there was 13 rounds of layoffs, and I was not aware of this story. Awesome, man. So I know that you also have a great network of people working for consulting, Amit. You yourself have worked in investment banking, and you know a lot of people working for Bain, BCG, McKinsey. Now, this is for MBA applicants who want to explore consulting versus banking. It's at times very theoretical for them, coming out of undergrad, 3 to 4 years, and then they're thinking these are the two hot topics in MBA. As per you, how different is the learning curve? How is one direction different from the other?
Okay, to your point, even I looked at both. Okay, even though I went to school, wanting to be an investment banker, but then I started getting interview calls from the top three: BCG, McKinsey, Bain, and I said, why not, right? So I evaluated both of those careers, and I'll tell you my own experience, and then basis that what I've seen other people do in both consulting and banking careers as well, from my class, from other people in the background, right? So I look at it very straightforward way, right? Consulting, you're traveling 4 to 5 days a week. You're literally living out of a suitcase or of a hotel. From day one, you're working at a client location, so there is nowhere to hide. Right now, you are the reputation of a BCG, McKinsey, Bain is entrusted upon you. So you need to deliver, and you're at the client's location, right? So you are visible. Okay. Consultants are great at identifying problems and suggesting or proposing a solution, right? But then they move away to the next assignment. Okay, so the execution part is not there. Having said that, because you're working in client locations, because you're going from one assignment to another on a very typically in a quick turnaround time, sometimes in months, sometimes at max it goes to a year. You build a great network, a direct network, even as a young person, right? And that if you're not keen on becoming a consultant for the rest of your life, you have a great network that you can leverage on, and you would have built a great reputation with some of the largest companies that this consulting firms serve, and a job as a general manager and etc. is very easy. Okay, so living out of a suitcase, uh, directly at client locations, a great visibility, right? Uh, Solution provider, but you're not executing. So that I feel that is a little bit of a con, but a great network, right? When it comes to investment banking, the first couple of years are spent inside the office, right? Working 90 to 100, 120 hours sometimes a week. Okay. The ramp up is very, very important because when somebody starts out an investment banking career, the work that is given is crap. Okay. Like literally, like punching in numbers, doing the photocopying, doing PowerPoint presentations, rectifying mistakes, working on markup after markup from your VP slash director slash MD, right? But if you can do all of these things well in a high pressure environment, and uh, your attention to detail is really, really good, your ability to do whatever it takes is great, then you ramp up very quickly, and the kind of quality of the work that you get also ramps up very quickly, right? So I think investment banking that way prepares you for anything and everything that life has to throw at you, right? So that's how I evaluate a consulting versus an investment banking career. Investment bankers typically move on to remain an investment banker or move on to a VC private equity role, right? Not many go back to the industry. A consulting guy, on the other hand, typically moves away from after 2 or 3 years, 4 years maybe, and it goes into more of an industry role. Again, I hope I addressed your question, Jatin.
Yes, absolutely. And so my next question for you is, how was your experience of working in one of the largest capital markets, London, in finance? For people who want to move into finance, move into banking, how was your experience?
Yeah. So again, taking a step back before I answer the question directly. So my objective was to work for 2 years in New York, 2 years in London, 2 years in Hong Kong, and then move back to India because I thought, New York, London, and Hong Kong were the three key financial markets, right? It didn't really pan out that way for many different reasons. London, right? Amazing, amazing market, and I'll tell you why, right? So London covers the EMEA region, EMEA, right? That is Europe, Middle East, and Africa. Okay. Now these are literally very distinct markets. So Europe again can be divided into two parts. One is Western Europe, which is where UK, France, Germany, Netherlands come in. Then you have the Central Eastern Europe, which is the new emerging countries like Poland and Serbia and Russia, etc., etc. And then you have Middle East, which is a completely different market, completely different set of clients, and then Africa, which is much more up and coming, right? And the challenges and the fun of walking across these different markets is huge and humongous. You're walking with very, very high profile large companies based out of Western Europe who know how to deal with bankers, who know what the value of an investment banker is, versus going to smaller countries in Africa or Central Eastern Europe who may not be really aware of what value an investment banker brings. I'm assuming that investment banker does bring in some value. Okay, so that's an underlying assumption, right? Um, so it is awesome. You are at any point of time, you're working on pitches or transactions, which could be one in Western Europe, one in Middle East, and the needs and demands are so different. The way relationships works with clients is so different. Middle East is more like Asia, where the personal connect with the client is very critical. In Western Europe, not so much. It's all about work and being professional, etc., etc. So huge learning experience. It again prepares you for dealing with any kind of client anywhere in the world. Makes you a truly global professional, in my view.
Okay. And even when you were out there, when you were working in London as a senior leader, I'm sure you've recruited a lot of people in your life. I mean, you've recruited a lot of MBAs, and you've studied in a 2-year MBA, and you've worked in Europe where there are a lot of 1-year MBAs as well. You've recruited people in India as well. As for you, what is the key distinction between a 1-year MBA versus a 2-year MBA?
Yeah. Again, I'll again go back to my own experience as well, right? So when I applied for B schools, I was in Singapore, right? So And I applied to both 1 year and 2 year programs, right? So I did get an admit from INSEAD, and I had a couple of admits from 2 year programs as well, right? So luckily, INSEAD has a campus in Singapore, and I visited that, right? I could not afford to go and visit MBA colleges in the US, but INSEAD was right there. So what someone, a current student at INSEAD in Singapore told me was quite interesting, and that kind of stuck with me. And that's the advice I still give to students who are figuring out this 1 year versus 2 year program, right? So what this guy told me is, um, what's your objective of doing an MBA? Okay, is it to learn? Is it to do a career switch? Is it to do both? Okay. So I said it's to do both for me, right? Because I come from a software background. I needed to learn finance, which is kind of the missing link in my profile. And I also wanted to become an investment banker. So crazy career switch, right? He said that maybe INSEAD is not the right option for you then, because INSEADs are or for that matter, any 1 year program is typically a 10 months program, right? You get one shot at recruitment, it's a full-time thing. So the whole concept, I think INSEAD is building some internship component now, but generally 1 year program has a one shot at getting recruited. So either you're learning or you're recruiting or networking, right? So learning or networking. To do both is crazily difficult. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult, right? So my advice to people is that, if you are looking to enhance your learning and if you want to grow within your own industry, let's say you work in finance and you want to maybe move within finance to a different role or a different stream, then a 1 year program still makes sense. But if you come to a complete career jump and you want to learn as well, so I think a 2 year program is much better. It gives you a lot of bandwidth to learn. It gives you two opportunities to recruit, one for the summer internship and the other one for a full-time job as well, in case your summer internship doesn't work out well. And that reflects when it comes to recruiting as well. When I went to recruit people and I realized, for investment banking in particular, because that's what I was recruiting for at HSBC. So I did go to London Business School, for example, and I did go to INSEAD as well in Paris, right? And I realized that people who were coming from a finance background or even from a consulting background but worked in the financial domain, they were well prepared for a job in investment banking.
Okay.
But if somebody was a complete career switch, it was very difficult to hire. Versus in LBS, especially for second year, by that time they would have ramped up, they would have done an internship, so they're more ready, job ready.
So what you're saying is, if somebody is currently switching both industries and functions, a complete career switch, and if they join our 10-month MBA program, they will probably have to make a very tough choice between having a strong learning curve versus reaching out to, let's say, 100 people, networking, getting tons of rejections.
Yes.
And
so it's not impossible, but it's more difficult. It's just infinitely more difficult.
I remember my time at Darden, and I remember the Black November at Darden. Recruiting was at peak. Weather was the most crazy. Exams were. So I know what you mean. Thank you.
Yeah. So again, the second part of your question was about US MBA versus
European MBA.
European MBA, right? And I'll put in the Indian MBA as well into the same context, right?
Yes.
So from a purely recruiting standpoint, the US market is probably the most well structured. Okay, so as I alluded to in my first kind of answer, recruitment in the US B school starts literally 2 weeks after you join. Okay, as a first year, right? So by the time interview session comes up about in 4-5 months time, the so-called school teams that each bank has, they would have visited your campus 7-8 times, and you yourself would have gone to Wall Street in New York 1, 2 or 3 times, and networked so much and learned so much about each other that the shortlisting for interviews is kind of already known.
What is the school team, Amit? For our viewers, they'll have no idea. What is the school team in an investment bank?
Okay, so again, I'm talking both from a Europe and US perspective. So each firm, whether it's Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, HSBC, Citi, etc., they have a set of employees who are designated to recruit from a particular school.
Okay.
Right? So for example, and typically this school team would be ex-students of that particular school. So if let's say 7, 8 Darden students work in City, they typically would be part of the school team at City to recruit from Darden, right? Doesn't necessarily have to be the same school, but typically that's how it normally works out, right? And then each of these banks has a kind of a high level quota, saying that, let's say, City says, I will hire 7 interns from Darden every year, right? Or 5 to 8 interns every year. Likewise, when I go to Harvard, I'll hire 10 to 15 interns every year, etc. Right? So this school team then comes to campus, okay, the school team which is part of City or JP or whatever, and then they will interact with the students. And when they go back to their offices, they have a nice Excel. Okay, so they'll say, Jatin, great guy. He knows how to talk well. He carries his drink properly. He has solid interest in aspects that are of interest to us. Amit Chakrabarthy, on the other hand, he cannot carry. He gets drunk very quickly. Doesn't network well. So debatable, right? So by the time 4-5 months pass by, when they eventually look at the Excel, it's very clear whom you want to shortlist for an interview, right? And then the interview itself is not necessarily technical. You probably end up talking about NBA, basketball, football, traveling, etc., because you already know each other very well. Okay, so this is how well structured the recruitment cycle in the US is, right? And then, especially in investment banking, full-time recruitment is only to fill up the small gaps that you have. So typically, what happens is if you have, let's say, 100 interns from different business schools interning in New York, typically about 70-75 will get a full-time job. It's all about your performance, right? But they are looking at, let's say, 85 full-time employees, right? So they need 10 more. So it's only for this additional 10 more, they will go to all the business schools in the US. So it's infinitely more difficult to get into the second year as a full-time job versus when you're at a summer internship role. It's much easier. When it comes to Europe, it's kind of structured, but not as good a structure as US. So most banks, again, have a school team. They do 1 or 2 or maybe 3 info sessions at a school. And then there's directly recruitment session where it's a lot of focus in a resume and how you exactly perform in an interview, right? When it comes to India, you probably have 1 info session, that too on the day of the interview, or maybe 1 day or 1 week before the interview session. And typically, when you go for the interviews, 1 panel interview or 2 or 3 interviews, and then you give an offer letter, right? So if you crack that 1 interview well, you get a job. If you kind of screw up in that 1 interview, you don't get a job, right? As simple as it. While in the US, it's like a proper period. You really need to screw up not to get it. There's an interview. Okay. Again, so you were asking about the recruitment only, right? Or did you have?
Just a follow-up question. If somebody coming from a manufacturing background or a supply chain background or a non-finance background, essentially, say that I want to move into investment banking from a 1-year MBA,
Right.
where there is not an opportunity to do an internship, how
Right.
easy or how tough would it be?
So you have to convert your weakness into a strength. Okay. So what I mean by that is, whom are you competing with? So let's say I come from a manufacturing background, right? I'm in a 1-year program or 2 years program, doesn't matter. Okay. Now I'm competing against my own classmates who might be coming from different backgrounds. Some of them could have been ex-investment bankers as well, right?
Yeah.
So how do you convert that weakness of not having that finance experience into a strength? So what you have to demonstrate is that you have your finance knowledge or your finance skills, which are as good as your classmate who comes from a finance background, because you have demonstrated that in your classwork, in your learning. You can say can ask me anything on technical aspects. I'm happy to answer, right? You have to have that confidence, right? But what I bring additional on board, which a finance experienced guy would not have, is a more diverse experience, right? So I have a manufacturing background. So tomorrow, if I become an investment banker and I have to cover that particular space, industrial space, which that's where manufacturing come in, I have a lot more subject matter expertise in that area, which my classmate comes from a finance background might not have, right? So I have my finance skills, which are as good, if not better than my classmate. Plus I have the subject matter expertise in manufacturing. Okay. So that's how I'd convert that weakness into a strength.
Okay.
Am I making sense? I don't know.
Yep, 100%, 100%. Last question for you, Amit. a lot of people who want to get into investment banking, they are not aware of their long-term aspirations, right? They think that I'll start in finance, maybe then I'll take on a leadership position in the investment bank, but they're not aware of the wide varieties of futures that are available for them, right? And you move from banking to now non-profit, working, leading CFA in the Asia Pacific region. Uh, what inspired you to make this shift? One. Second, what do you think are the wide variety of futures that investment banker or somebody like you could have explored after how many years of HSBC, Amit? 7 years?
7, 8 years, yeah,
Yeah,
almost.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's not easy. It's not an easy decision, okay? And greed plays a. I'm just being very honest with you. So greed plays a big part in why it's not easy, right? So I mean, for the right or wrong reasons, investment banking is one of the most well-paid jobs in the world, right?
Yeah.
And in India, the disparity is even higher. Like the kind of salaries an investment banker gets, it's like 3x, 4x than typically any other job within even the financial service industry. Forget about any other industry, right? So greed plays a large part in why you are not looking out in the first place. So, but when it comes to my own experience, why I decided to make the shift, a couple of things. Like as I grew more senior from an associate to a VP to a director, I realized that the stress levels were not coming down. Okay, so even though I was not spending a lot of time in the office, investment banking is, if you want to do well, is a 24/7, 365 days a year job, right? Doesn't matter whether you're on vacations, doesn't matter what you're doing. The job always takes priority. Okay, you are at the back end call of your clients. If you're working on a transaction, there's no escape, right? So stress level doesn't come down, right? Having said that, after the global financial crisis, the rewards itself were not as great as it used to be before the financial crisis. Things have changed, and I think post this current COVID crisis as well, there will be another shift. Okay, so these are very important years in the history of the industry and all, like global financial crisis, that's COVID pandemic, etc. Right? So from a personal perspective, I had a young daughter. She was 2 years old, and I realized I was not being able to give her enough time as a father. I was, even if I was home, I would be on my BlackBerry. That's what was being used those days. So my mind would be completely somewhere else, right? And I had to make this decision that what is more important to me, right? Is it the money and the career and the excitement of being an investment banker because I love the job, or do I want to spend more time with my daughter as she's growing up, right? So that aspect was there. The second aspect was probably more critical and important to me. As a director, it was my job to figure out what I'm going to pitch to clients or not, right? Now, is it really in the best interest of my client, whatever I'm pitching, and whether it's a M&A idea or the capital markets idea, etc., right? And I realized that a lot of us were a lot of the industry looked out for the best interests of ourselves because our fees, as a banking fee, rather than what's great for the client and all, right? And I mean, me, I'm an outspoken guy, I'm a blunt guy, and my heart and head cannot be in two different places. It's always in one direction, right? So that conflict was killing me. Okay, so I thought what can I do to try to make a small change in the industry and try to bring in more or better corporate governance standards, more ethical standards, where you look out for the end customer before your own interests and all. And that's where I was lucky to bump into this job at CFA Institute, which is and my job here is exactly that. I engage with the industry. I encourage them to adopt better ethical standards, better practices, where you always look out for the best interest of the end customer or the end investor. So that was the thought process. A little bit cluttered, but I hope I made some sense.
No, absolutely, 100%. And the second part of the same question was, what are the other directions that people can take
That's right.
after banking? Yes.
So I think, as I said, investment banking prepares you for anything that life can throw at you, right? So entrepreneurship, like what you have done, Jatin, I think that's something that one can really easily explore. Okay,
Okay.
like the passion, the drive, the focus that's required to an entrepreneur typically comes in an investment banker as well. I think a lot more companies in India in particular now are becoming very professional in terms of their management. So corporate finance is a big part of most large companies, whether it's Reliance Industries or Grasim or Aditya Birla Group, etc., etc. So a job as a corporate finance guy, where you're looking at the business strategy for that company, which side will you grow, organic versus inorganic. If it is inorganic, which directions will it grow, etc., etc., is definitely a job that one can explore, right? Consulting again, so investment bankers and investment banking and consulting have a lot of covers there. There's a lot of respect between both the industries. So it's not unknown for investment banking bankers to move into consulting and consultants to move into investment banking. So that role is also there. Buy side, whether it's hedge funds, private equity, VC, again, another area that a lot of investment bankers go into. Much more difficult to do, but possible. Finally, working in a much smaller firm, so I spoke about the bulge bracket banks and all, but there are a lot of small boutique investment banks where the culture is much more, very different, so it's much more laid back and you're focused not on just marky big deals. You're working on smaller 1 crore, 2 crore kind of deals. But it's very satisfying because you're seeing a small business grow into a much bigger business because you're bringing in that expertise of giving them the right capital market or strategic advice as well. So lots of roles that can be explored. I think it's very important for one to be constantly in touch with one's guides and mentors and just keep talking to different people and you never know what idea strikes you. And as I said, the investment banker is now prepared to do anything.
Got it. Well, thank you so much for your time, Amit. A lot of our people, a lot of our viewers, people who are looking at careers in finance, banking across the world will find it immensely, immensely helpful. Thank you.
Jatin, I hope so.
It was really, really helpful. Thank you.